He sat where he always did, right at the corner of 47th and Holman, beneath a rusted traffic light that blinked red longer than it should have. Walter had been part of the city's forgotten background for years now, a quiet shape on the edge of people's vision. A faded coat, a patched wool cap, a cart with one wobbly wheel and a worn blanket folded just so. Most days, no one really saw him. The suits were too busy, earbuds in, coffee in hand. The students walked fast, eyes glued to glowing screens. He'd stopped expecting anything more. But that afternoon, something cut through the usual static, a break in the rhythm. Across the street, a woman was clutching her belly, leaning against a pole like her legs had suddenly betrayed her. She was clearly pregnant. 8 months, maybe more. Her face had gone pale, lips drawn tight with pain. And yet not a single person slowed down. Not the man in the tailored navy coat brushing past her shoulder. Not the woman whose heels clicked loudly as she veered away. The light changed. She stepped forward, and then everything cracked. Walter saw it before anyone else. The hesitation in her knees. The panic in her eyes. Her foot caught the lip of the curb and she swayed, just as a black SUV hurtled through the intersection. For a second, it was all noise, horns, tires, distant shouts. But Walter didn't think. He moved, bad leg and all. He shoved his cart out of the way, its contents spilling into the gutter. The pain in his knee screamed, but he ignored it, launching himself forward with a sound that was half a groan, half a cry. The woman began to fall. Walter reached her as her body buckled. One hand gripped her elbow, the other wrapped around her back. Somehow, impossibly, he pulled her just far enough to the sidewalk that the car clipped only air behind them. They collapsed together against a bench. Her breathing was shallow, strained, one arm protectively over her stomach. His own heart pounded like it might give out from the strain. But she was alive. And the baby was, too. People finally began to notice. A few looked over, some slowed. One woman in designer sunglasses muttered something about calling an ambulance, but didn't. A man with a briefcase paused, checked his watch, and kept going. Walter held the woman upright, steadying her even as tremors worked through his own limbs. She whispered something he couldn't hear. He leaned closer, and she repeated it, just 2 words. "It hurts." That was all. Not panic, not screaming, just a quiet admission. That hurt more than he could explain. He searched her eyes and saw not fear, but exhaustion. The kind that no amount of money or privilege could shield you from. The kind that made strangers your last hope. And somehow, in that instant, the line between their worlds collapsed. There was no billionaire's wife, no homeless man. Just 2 human beings caught in the open, waiting for someone else to care. No one came. Walter didn't know her name. Didn't know she lived in a penthouse just 5 blocks away, or that her husband owned a chain of international hotels. All he knew was that she needed help, and that he was the only one giving it. He took off his coat, thin as it was, and folded it behind her head. She tried to speak again, but her breath caught, and he gripped her hand to calm her. "You're okay," he said, his voice low, cracked from years of wind and silence. "You're not alone." But she was, and so was he. Until now. In that one moment, something shifted. The world had passed them both by. Her too rich to be real, him too poor to matter. But now they were tethered, and neither one of them would ever forget it. Before the horns and the rush, before the moment the world glimpsed him through that act of courage, Walter's life unfolded in the margins, in places people forgot existed. His mornings began beneath the iron overpass 2 blocks east of the Bakery District, a place where exhaust fumes lingered and the wind carried the sound of train brakes echoing through steel beams. He slept curled against the wall, arms around a backpack that held everything he owned, mostly memories. Each morning, he would carefully fold the thin army blanket he'd kept since his first winter outside, smoothing out its worn edges like someone making a bed for a guest who might never come. His hands moved with slow precision, more ritual than routine, as if caring for this single possession kept some small ember of normalcy alive. There was a time Walter had keys in his pocket. A small apartment. Nothing fancy. Just a second-floor unit above a laundromat that always smelled like dryer sheets and floor wax. He worked at a machine shop then, hands blackened from long days but proud of the parts he made. It was honest work. That all changed the year his wife fell sick. The hospital visits came quickly, then the prescriptions, then the paperwork. He sold his car to cover the first round of treatments. Sold his tools the month after. By the time the final bill came, the one with red letters and numbers that made no sense, he was already walking. When she died, so did the last piece of structure in his life. After that, it was just movement. Corner to alley, shelter to sidewalk. But Walter never became what people assumed. He didn't yell at strangers, didn't beg with loud desperation. Instead, he sat quietly near the corner, cardboard sign resting beside his cart. It simply said, "Trying to get home." And beneath that, a small, hand-drawn sketch of a house, a triangle roof, a square door, and a tree that curved protectively over the yard. He kept the original folded in his coat pocket, worn soft from years of touch. He said little, just a quiet good morning when someone met his eyes, though that happened less and less. People maneuvered around him like he was a lamppost or trash bin, something stationary and inconvenient. Security guards in blue windbreakers warned him not to get too close to corporate entrances. "Not here, old man. Move it along." He always nodded, never talked back. When the soup kitchen opened, he waited until the line thinned. Always thanked the volunteers. Sometimes he'd split his roll with someone hungrier. Once, he gave a pair of socks to a young runaway shivering by the tracks. That was Walter, still seeing others, even when no one saw him. Back at the crosswalk, the air hung heavy with exhaust and the sharp pulse of city noise. Elena gripped the metal pole beside her, knuckles white, lips parted in a grimace. Her blouse clung damp to her back, darkened with sweat that beaded on her brow and slipped down her cheek. One hand stayed firmly on her stomach, fingers splayed across the taut curve as if she could shield the life inside with sheer will. Her breathing came shallow, irregular, and Walter noticed. He didn't know her name, not yet, but something about the way she shifted her weight, the slight tremor in her knees, the way her eyes blinked too slowly, it all told him what others missed. She wasn't just tired. She was in trouble. Walter pushed himself to his feet, leg protesting with each movement. The light changed. The current of the crowd surged forward, and so did she. But her step faltered. Her ankle caught the edge of the curb wrong, rolling beneath her with a sharp twist, and her arms flailed too late to stop what gravity had already decided. A car roared through the lane, just missing her as she pitched forward. And in that sliver of chaos, Walter moved. He reached her in 3 strides that felt like 100, grabbing her arm and yanking her back just before her knees met pavement in disaster. They hit the ground hard, her shoulder against his chest, both of them collapsing in a heap beside the bench. People froze. Someone gasped. Another pulled out their phone. No one reached down. Walter untwisted his limbs, chest heaving, and reached for the bottle of water in his cart. The plastic crinkled as he unscrewed the cap with shaking hands and held it to her lips. She took one sip, then another. He eased her to a seated position, supporting her back as she closed her eyes. "Just breathe," he said gently, brushing her hair from her face. "You're safe now." Then came the commotion. A man in a blazer and a lanyard came storming from the glass building across the street. His words cut sharp through the moment. "Hey, what's going on here? Step away from her." He didn't look at Elena, didn't look at the broken cart or the tire tracks inches from where she'd fallen. He grabbed Walter's shoulder roughly and pulled. "You can't be harassing women out here. I saw you. Don't lie." Walter didn't resist, only raised his palms. "She fell," he tried to explain. He helped me," Elena said, voice thin as paper. "He saved me." The man hesitated but didn't let go. The roar of tires sliced through the noise as a sleek black SUV skidded to a stop beside the crowd. Doors flew open, and a tall man in a charcoal suit stepped out, followed by a driver and a second man with an earpiece who scanned the scene like a hawk. The suit, Daniel, moved fast, straight to the woman on the bench, his voice sharp with panic. "Elena," he called, crouching beside her, brushing her hair back with trembling fingers. "Are you okay? What happened?" Who did this? His tone turned colder as he stood and faced the guard. What happened here? The guard, eager to pass blame, gestured harshly at Walter. This bum grabbed her, sir. I saw him pull her down. She was struggling, looked bad. I was just trying to get him off her. Walter didn't defend himself. He didn't flinch. This wasn't new. Being accused, being explained away without being asked. He stood silent, eyes on Elena, hands loose at his sides. The guard's voice grew louder, feeding off the presence of money and power. We've had issues like this before, sir. They hang around the corners, sometimes get aggressive. Elena shifted, her hands searching. No, she whispered, forcing the word through clenched teeth. He saved me. Daniel turned, startled by the sound of her voice. Only then did he truly look at Walter. Not glance, look. He saw the sweat on the old man's brow, the red scrapes on his palms from the fall, the date smudged on worn sleeves, and the half-empty water bottle still resting on the bench beside his wife. A flicker of shame crossed Daniel's face. It was brief, but unmistakable. His jaw tightened, not in anger but realization. Step back, he said to the guard, voice low but final. The guard hesitated, then obeyed. Thank you, Daniel said to Walter. The words came haltingly, like he hadn't said them often enough in his life. I didn't understand. I'm sorry. The sound of sirens neared, and moments later EMTs surrounded Elena with practiced urgency. She winced as they lifted her, but her hand reached back instinctively, fingers searching. Walter took it gently, just for a second. Her grip was surprisingly strong, a silent promise that she would not forget. As the medics eased her into the ambulance, Daniel turned to Walter again. He reached into his coat, pulled out a business card, and pressed it into the older man's hand. Come to this address tomorrow, he said. Please. Then he was gone. Walter looked down. The card read, Daniel V. Mercer, CEO, Mercer Global Holdings. That night, the city cooled into silence, and beneath the familiar overpass, Walter sat cross-legged on a patch of worn cardboard. The business card balanced delicately between his fingers like it might shatter if held too tight. The name gleamed faintly under the street lamp, Mercer Global Holdings. It looked too clean for his hands, too crisp for the folds of his coat. Part of him wanted to believe it meant something. But another part, the part hardened by years of empty promises and quiet disappearances, warned him not to. People had said things before, volunteers who said they'd come back with supplies, strangers who offered job referrals with smiles that never returned. Words were easy. Doors rarely opened. He turned the card over again, then tucked it into his inside pocket where he kept the little drawing of the house. Probably just a thank you, he muttered aloud, voice bouncing off cold concrete. But even that mattered. Even that small chance to know she was okay, that the baby had made it through, was worth the risk of disappointment. As trucks thundered overhead and the night closed around him, he made his decision. He would go. At dawn, he found a public restroom just opening near the bus terminal. He washed his face, running cold water over sun-cracked skin, rubbing at the grime until the mirror gave him back a version of himself that didn't flinch. He straightened his jacket, flattened the collar, and folded his blanket neatly into the cat. His reflection didn't look powerful, but it looked ready. The walk uptown took nearly an hour. As the streets grew cleaner and the buildings taller, Walter's steps slowed. When the tower came into view, steel and glass catching the gold of morning light, his chest tightened. Mercer Global Holdings loomed above the street like something carved from a different world. Walter hesitated across the street, watching men in tailored suits walk through the revolving doors without so much as a glance upward. He crossed with care, pushing his cart to the corner, then left it locked near a bike rack. Just in case. Inside the doorway, security turned toward him. Not with kindness, with suspicion. One man put a hand on his radio. Another tilted his chin. "Sir," one said, already preparing to ask him to move along. Walter said nothing, just reached into his jacket and held out the card. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the man looked at it, blinked, looked again. "I'll make a call," he said, already dialing. The other guard leaned closer. 2 minutes passed. Then the guard's entire posture shifted. "Mr. Mercer's expecting him," he said, almost too quickly. "Right this way." The security gate opened with a quiet hum, and Walter followed one of the guards across marble floors that echoed beneath his shoes. They didn't make him wait in the lobby. Instead, they led him straight to the elevator. The buttons glowed gold, and the guard stood silently beside him, hands clasped. As they rose floor after floor, Walter stared at the glass wall, revealing a view of the entire city, tiny taxes, even smaller people. He had never stood so high above anything before. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Walter stepped into a hallway quieter than any street he'd ever walked. A receptionist gave him a polite nod, then led him to a set of double glass doors that slid open without a sound. The office beyond was spacious, yes, but not cold. No marble statues, no towering oil paintings, just warm wood walls, soft light from tall windows, and a scattering of family photos on the shelves. Daniel stood near the window, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, looking nothing like the frantic man from yesterday. His face bore the lines of a sleepless night, but when he turned and saw Walter, his shoulders dropped with something close to relief. Getting her out of the street when you did, it may have saved both their lives. "Thank you." Walter nodded, not trusting his voice. Daniel motioned to a chair, offered him coffee, which Walter politely declined, then sat across from him, elbows on his knees, hands folded. "I wanted to know you," Daniel said. "Not the headlines or the guesses. Just you." Walter hesitated, then slowly began. Not the whole story, just pieces. How he once worked with machines. How his wife had a soft laugh and too much trust in the world. How cancer didn't just take her, it took the floor from under him. How bills became debts, and debts became days on benches, and eventually everyone stopped asking what had happened to him. "But I try," he said softly. "I try to be kind." Still, Daniel listened. No interruptions, no pity, just quiet attention. When Walter finished, the silence stretched a moment longer. Then Daniel exhaled. "I want to help. A home, a job, if you'd want one. Anything you need. Really." Walter's eyes shimmered, but he shook his head gently. "That means a lot," he said. "But there's something else. Just one thing." He reached into his coat pocket, unfolding a creased, weather-soft piece of paper. He held it out. Daniel leaned forward. It was a childlike drawing. Simple lines, crooked tree, a building with wide doors and a long bench out front. "It's not my home," Walter said. "It used to be a shelter, one street down from where I used to live. They called it Hope House. Nothing fancy, just a roof, warm meals, clean water. It closed when the land was sold off. Company name had your logo on it. Since then, there's been nothing." He let the silence return. Let the weight of it settle. "I'm not asking for me," Walter added. "I can manage. But there are folks out there, women, kids, veterans, who don't even have a wall to lean against. If you could reopen a place like that, that would matter. That would last." Daniel didn't speak. His eyes dropped to the drawing again, then to Walter's hands, hands that had caught his wife, steadied her, given Walter without asking for anything in return. The card, the meeting, the coffee, none of it could repay what this man had done. And yet, here Walter was asking not for a bed, or a check, or a reward, but for a door others could walk through long after he was gone. Daniel blinked hard. Once, then again. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "We'll build it," he said. "Better than before." Weeks later, the old building on Harper Street no longer stood in shadow. Where plywood had once covered broken windows, fresh glass now caught the morning sun. Faded graffiti had given way to pale blue walls, and a new wooden sign hung proudly above the door, Morning Light Haven. Inside, everything smelled faintly of clean linen and warm bread. There were rows of simple beds, clean showers, cubbies for belongings, and chairs arranged in ways that invited conversation rather than isolation. It wasn't extravagant, but it was sacred in its own way. For the first time in years, the forgotten had a place made for them. Not a leftover corner, but a beginning. Walter moved through the halls quietly, gently. He wasn't staff, not really, and he didn't want to be on it. He just wanted to help. He greeted each newcomer with a kind word, offered them a blanket, showed them where to find coffee and warmth. Some days, he shared his story. Other days, he just listened. But always, he made people feel seen. The house, after all, was never really about shelter. It was about dignity. Daniel and Elena arrived one afternoon, without photographers or speeches. Just them, and their baby, a small boy wrapped in a yellow knit blanket. Elena hugged Walter tightly, whispering, "You saved both of us." Daniel stood beside the new sign, hand resting on the carved letters. "Your words," he said softly. "Morning light." It sounded like hope. One man, no money, no title, but he opened a door. And as you close this video, maybe take one look around your own city. Someone sitting quietly on the edge of your vision might just be waiting for a moment to matter. If this story moved you, help us share more like it. Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because the world needs more stories that turn invisibility into belonging.